75% of the Earth is covered by oceans. Oceans are the host to the largest pool of biodiversity and is also the world's largest carbon sink, absorbing a quarter of the carbon that humans put into the air. Weather and temperature are also greatly affected by the ocean. Changes in the ocean temperature can affect overall weather patterns. There's a complex system in each part of the ocean's layers that are all ultimately dependent on each other. The zones of the ocean have their own food chains, yet a change in one area's food chain can drastically change the conditions of its surroundings. The intertidal zone is where the ocean meets the shore. Its communities are constantly changing because of its direct access to pollution. The open water of the ocean is called the pelagic zone. Many species are able to live in this area because of the photosynthesis taking place and large amount of food and resources. Below that is the benthic zone. The deepest part of the ocean is called the abyssal zone, and it is unique to any other area because of the crushing pressures and lack of oxygen. Although the different zones vary, they are all related and affect one another. The Gulf of Mexico contains a huge amount of biodiversity and at the same time balances industry and recreation, plus fishing and development, which affects the natural habitats of wildlife and creates an increased amount of pollution. The Gulf provides up to 1/3 of the country's commercial fishing and 27% of its domestically produced oil and 20% of domestic natural gas.
11 workers are still missing and feared dead, while the rig that exploded on Tuesday has now sunk, threatening a major oil spill off the Louisiana
Gulf
coast.
of Mexico. Depending on how much is coming out of that well a day, it's dumped somewhere between 6 and 60 million gallons of crude oil into our water. That's the water in the Gulf and wherever else it will travel over time. Certainly up onto the beaches of the Gulf, Louisiana and Mississippi and Alabama and Florida, perhaps then up the coast to the Carolinas. That crude oil isn't going away. It's going to be there where it's not supposed to be.
What happens when humans' mistakes threaten the most important biome on the planet? Devastating effects. You have seen it on the news. You have seen professional parodies about it. Oil spills are everywhere and seem to have few solutions, if any. The most famous oil spills are probably the Exxon Valdez oil spill in 1989, the Eureka oil spill only 10 years later in 1999, the Prestige oil spill in 2002, and the most recent oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico in early 2010. Because oil rigs and offshore drilling is flawed, leaking literally tons of oil into our oceans seems to be an upsetting, reoccurring theme. As for the spill right off the coast of Louisiana, there were a number of problems that subsequently caused the explosion, the tragic death of 11, and the following horrifying long-term and short-term effects of the animals, plants, and environmental tasks that depend on the ocean. Because the cement around the pipe that drills into the oil started to fail, the pipe gained some movement, which caused problems for the rest of the rig. The balance of mud and seawater that is supposed to contain the fumes coming from the oil gets disrupted and causes the gas to shoot up the pipe, causing a massive explosion and the holes in the fallen pipe to leak gallons of oil into the ocean per day. Once the oil rig has sunk, the rig continues to spill gallons of oil and mostly rises to the top of the ocean, creating problems for almost all of the ocean life. The oil puddles spread at its surprisingly rapid pelagic pace. Zones of the ocean were most affected because that is where a majority of the ocean life lives. The plants, first off, are dependent on the act of photosynthesis to live. As we know, photosynthesis is basically the act of the plants taking the sunlight and turning that sunlight into food. When the top of the ocean is slicked with oil, there is an inability for the sunlight to reach the plants on the top of the ocean, and because of this, the plants are unable to flourish. This is the beginning of the problems for the ocean life and the organized food chain. Once the available plants and plankton start to deplete, the animals that live off of those things will start to die off as well. Not only that, but the birds that prey off of the plants and animals at the top of the ocean will also be affected on account of the missing primary producers in the ocean food chain. Once the primary producers disappear, it is only a matter of time before the secondary producers disappear, start to die off, and so on, into the deepest zone of the ocean. Because of all the nutrients at the top of the ocean are falling into the bottom of the ocean, there is a change in the balance of nutrients, which is also a factor in affecting the food chain and balance of the ocean.
The animals that prey on the plants and animals on the top layer of the ocean, but do not actually live in the ocean, are still greatly affected, but in a different aspect. Because the primary producers at the top of the ocean are dying off so rapidly due to the oil, the birds that also prey on the primary producers have to struggle to find food. Because the animals in the ocean, along with those outside of the ocean, are struggling to find the same food, there is an increasing amount of interspecific competition for food, considering that some of the ocean life share a niche with birds. Because the birds have to struggle to find food, there is also intraspecific competition, and this also incorporates the idea of natural selection. The birds that fail in finding any food might die off, while the birds that have the right adaptations to live in the new warped habitat are the ones that will be able to reproduce and prosper. The birds with larger beaks that are able to penetrate through the oil-slicked water and reach the food under the oil will be able to live. Also, the birds with larger wings would also be more capable of hovering over the ocean to scope out where the food is in order to have a better chance of living. Subsequently, since these birds are the ones that are able to live on and reproduce, the offspring will have the same adaptations as their parents, and more birds will have similar adaptations. The birds that do not have the best adaptations to deal with a disruption, like an oil spill, either just die or get confused and trapped in the oily waters.
Oil on their feathers, it mats their feathers and it reduces their ability to thermoregulate. They'll then ingest the oil while they're preening, but it also causes them to spend all of their time preening and not searching for food, and birds really need to spend quite a bit of time searching for food.
Before the oil spill, the laughing gull maintains a healthy weight, has a large wingspan, and a short beak.
Before the spill, the Gulf habitat is rich with diverse ocean life and plentiful vegetation. The wave currents move smoothly with little water pollution. The laughing gull pictured here is a typical species found by the shoreline.
After the spill, the ocean cannot move as fluidly because the oil is slicked over the top. The vegetation is dead and mostly gone, and the fish have died off due to the lack of producers, and the producers have died off due to their inability to perform photosynthesis. Because there are less fish in the ocean, the bird cannot maintain a healthy weight. And because the bird needs to hover over the ocean for longer periods of time in order to look for the few fish left, the bird needs a larger wingspan. And because the bird needs to dig deeper through the oil-slicked oceans to find the few fish left, the bird needs a larger beak. Oil spills damage other aspects of human life along with the animals. For example, tourism is an underrated problem with the oil spills because less people want to visit the oceans once they are polluted and these places start to lose value. Also, the absurd costs necessary for remedying the oil spills dig deep into the pockets of human populations. It is not good for our human health. The fumes coming from the oil is damaging to the human body and can have terrible long-term health issues. Once the oil is spilled, the ocean biome can no longer be considered a healthy system.
The number of school gymnasiums that could theoretically be filled floor to ceiling with oil from the Gulf of Mexico oil spill. Number of wildlife species threatened by the spill. Threatened species include sea life such as whales, tuna, and shrimp. Dozens of species of birds, land animals such as the gray fox and the white-tailed deer, and amphibians such as the alligator and the snapping turtle. Number of gallons of oil spilled into the oceans each year, Gulf of Mexico spill notwithstanding. Amount of oil consumed in the United States per day.